Hello, fourthies. It is Miss Mac, and I am recording live out of my living room so that I can do your grammar lesson with you. It is going to be great. It's on quotation marks, so let's get to it. Okay, so you should have a piece of paper that looks like this. You're going to need a pencil, which I'll use a pen because it shows up better, and a highlighter. I'm just going to use this marker. First things first, write your name on that paper for your teacher. Don't write my name. Okay, so you should have a paper that says writing dialogue in the secret garden. Punctuation counts when you're writing dialogue. It helps you understand who is speaking and what they are saying. In The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, the author uses dialogue to show how the characters relate to each other. Try your hand at adding quotation marks to the conversations below. In the first passage, Mary, an orphan, and Martha, a young servant girl, are just getting to know each other. In the second, Mary and her cousin Colin meet for the first time. Passage number 1. So first, let's see if we can figure out who is speaking. "I don't want it," she said. Well, this one's pretty easy. It's a direct quote. What does she actually say out loud? She says, "I don't want it." Notice that I'm including this comma inside the quotation mark. "You don't want your porridge?" Martha exclaimed incredulously. So what does she actually say out loud? She says, "You don't want your porridge." This is a direct quote from Martha. And the narrator gives us a little bit more background right here. We know she's exclaiming something incredulously. No, we don't know who's saying this, but we're assuming that it's part of the conversation. In fact, we can assume that it's Mary, the orphan, speaking. "You don't know how good it is. Put a bit of treacle on it, or a bit of sugar." Treacle is like molasses or syrup, if you don't know that. But what is said out loud? "You don't know how good it is." But her quote continues, "Put a bit of treacle on it, or a bit of sugar." Kind of sounds like Martha is trying to convince Mary of something. "I don't want it," repeated Mary. Again, what quote is being stated out loud? In this phrase, "I don't want it," and we're capturing this comma on the inside of the quotation marks. Said Martha, "I can't abide to see good food go to waste. If our children were at this table, they'd clean it bare in 5 minutes." Look how this quote is structured. The first thing that Martha says out loud is just an utterance. She says, said Martha. But then she begins again with another quote. "I can't abide to see good food go to waste. If our children were at this table, they'd clean it bare in 5 minutes. "Why?" said Mary coldly. Again, you're only capturing direct quotes here. What was spoken out loud, and include that end mark in your quote. "Why?" echoed Martha. "Because they've hardly ever had their stomachs full in their lives. They're as hungry as young hawks and foxes." So now we see that Martha starts off by echoing Mary. "Why?" she says. Then she goes on to explain out loud, because they've hardly ever had their stomachs full in their lives. So she's explaining that her kids have gone hungry before. "I don't know what it is to be hungry," said Mary with the indifference of ignorance. This means that Mary did not know what it was like to be hungry. She actually says this part out loud. "I don't know what it is to be hungry." Notice this comma is being captured inside the quote. Martha looked indignant. Does she say anything out loud? No. The narrator's just giving us information here. "Well, it would do you good to try it. I can see that plain enough," she said outspokenly. Here we go. this is what was spoken out loud. Okay, and capture that comma in there. Passage number 2 is a little bit more direct. How old are you? He asked. This is Mary actually talking to her cousin Colin. Okay, this quote's really easy to identify what was spoken out loud. I am 10, answered Mary, forgetting herself for the moment. And so are you. This sentence is much harder to figure out what was spoken out loud. We know she says, I am 10. We have this comma here to kind of help us know that she's speaking. But then the narrator gives us a lot of information. We know who's speaking, and we know that she forgets herself for the moment. She forgets her manners, but she starts to speak again. And so are you. How do you know that? He demanded in a surprised voice. This is a direct quote, so it's easy to identify. Because when you were born, the garden door was locked and the key was buried, and it has been locked for 10 years. Now we're assuming now that Mary is talking. It doesn't say that, but we can still infer that the dialogue is going back and forth, and she says all of this out loud. Okay, friends, so now let's take a look at the back. The back is much easier. It reminds us to use quotation marks to show someone's exact words. No quotation marks are used if we're just repeating what someone said. In this paper, it wants you to draw a line under the person's exact words. That's because it's much easier to figure out if a person's speaking if you underline what's said out loud. Example, Miss Simpson said, I think I will bake some cookies today. Notice that we underline this, and then it becomes very easy to add our quotes. I'm going to use my grandma's secret recipe, whispered Mrs. Simpson. So what does she actually say out loud? Right. I am going to use my grandma's secret recipe. Here's the comma. Whispered Mrs. Simpson. Mrs. Simpson said the cookies were done. This kind of just sounds like a narrator is giving us extra information. This is not a direct quote. This is indirect. You're not going to do anything to indirect quotes. Look at number 3. Yum, said Mr. Simpson. This one's very easy to identify what was said out loud. The kids love Mrs. Simpson's cookies. Is anything spoken here? It's not. This is an indirect quote. One time, Brett ate 9 cookies. This is still the narrator just giving us extra information. We don't know who's speaking or if they're stating anything out loud. Sally asked, comma, this is our hint that a quote is about to come. May I have your recipe, Mrs. Simpson? These are the things that Sally is actually asking out loud. Certainly, said Mrs. Simpson. You can see that they're exchanging a dialogue here. The recipe is on the back of the bag. Now, if this was up here with this, we could assume that Mrs. Simpson was saying it, but this could also be an indirect quote, and we don't know who's actually saying it. So we're going to leave this alone, okay? Because this is not written in a dialogue form like our paper was on the back, on the other side. Okay, one thing I want you to do for me, and you may not copy my example, is I want you to think of a direct quote. Use someone's exact words. And I want you to write it just right here on the line for me, like this. Writing is fun, comma, said Mrs. Mack. And what did I actually say out loud? Writing is fun. And it is. And so is using dialogues. Okay, fourthies, I love you, I love you, I love you. Have fun writing. Bye.